In this episode,
my cholesterol was over 350 for the total.
The total.
The total was 350. I'm like, how? I'm 21 years old. I was super healthy. Mm-hmm. And he goes, what did you change? I said, I became a vegetarian. And he's like, well, that shouldn't happen. I said, well, it did to me, and I didn't understand it. He goes, I will definitely put you on a statin. And I said, well, what's that? I didn't even know what that was. I was too young.
Yeah.
And I declined.
The research shows that low cholesterol people die sooner than people with high cholesterol. High cholesterol is very protective, and people with high cholesterol live longer and healthier than people with low cholesterol. If they are really concerned about your health, your heart health, do a little bit more research before you decide you're going to give them a medication for something that has too many other variables that are important to look at.
My own husband. He ran into the hospital with chest pains. He had a cardiac arrest on the table. That's when they checked his homocysteine levels, which were through the roof. They didn't even bother checking his cholesterol. They didn't check his cholesterol. It was his homocysteine levels. It just dawned on me.
Hello and welcome to Health in Focus with Jacobus. I am your host, Jacobus Hollewijn. This is a program about health, healing and healthy lifestyles. We're not here to diagnose, treat or cure. We're here to educate, inform and entertain. I bring people in, sometimes I do shows by myself, but the bottom line is that we're here to help and give you some insights in something you have thought about and maybe would like to get more information about, and this is what we're doing. So today's topic is cholesterol, understanding more about cholesterol, the worries we have, etc. My guest is Mitzi Kruslin, and I have known Mitzi for about 4 years. She has been in the natural supplement industry for 20 plus years. She also ran the vitamin shop in Wisconsin for 12 plus years. She managed that. And she is a certified nutritional counselor that she graduated in 2017, and she did that through the Institute of Integrative Nutrition in New York. And so very much welcome, Mitzi, for being on the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, we have known each other for 4 years, as I just mentioned, and I've seen her tremendous interest in helping people. She works with clients one-on-one. A little bit less since you moved to this area, but still something that you're passionate about.
Absolutely.
Now, I asked you to come talk about cholesterol, and you said, I have a story to tell. Why don't you tell us a little bit of your story that is a good introduction to what we're going to discuss today?
It fits right in because that's how I started my journey. Didn't even realize it at the time, though, that this was going to be a journey on natural health and wellness. As we all know, we all go to our doctors, we get our physicals, we get our checkups. I've always been healthy because I was a runner. However, though, back in ¡89, I remember there was a big shift in food of how we were supposed to eat. So I decided one day, I'm just going to stop eating meat. I want to become a vegetarian. I felt like I eat too much meat, and so, okay, I'll stop.
It must be healthier.
Well, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay. So I began that journey. I was still a runner, started eating more grains, more veggies, more pretty much all carbohydrates. You know, they told us cut down on the fats. I remember that in the TVs. The doctor told me that too. I'm like, well, but I was healthy. But I did it anyway. One day I had a little bike accident and I scraped the side of my leg and I had to go to the doctor. They said I needed a tetanus shot. However, though, they wanted to run my blood. They wanted to run my lipids.
Yeah.
They wanted to run the whole panel.
The whole panel, right.
The whole panel. So I did it. When the doctors came back in and I was still there, he was astonished. He mentioned my cholesterol was over 350 for the total.
The total.
The total was 350. I'm like, how? I'm 21 years old. I was super healthy. And he goes, what did you change? I said, well, I changed my diet. I became a vegetarian. And he's like, well, that shouldn't happen. I said, well, it did to me, and I didn't understand it. He goes, I will definitely put you on a statin. And I said, well, what's that? I didn't even know what that was. I was too young.
Yeah.
And I declined. And I said, well, I'm just going to just take it from here on out. And I left it as is.
Yeah.
You know, I continued becoming a vegetarian until I felt that I just wasn't feeling well. Even though I was a good runner, I exercised, I lived a healthy life, and something wasn't right.
You remember what are some of the symptoms that you felt? Were you just more tired? Or
I was more
aches
tired,
and pains,
lethargic. Well, I wasn't.
or headaches?
There was never aches and pains because I was young and I was a runner.
Right.
But it was more lethargic, and I did put on weight. I actually put on weight. I actually put on about 10 to 20 pounds, which I didn't understand at the time.
Yeah.
You know, because I was never large,
Right.
per se. But I do believe that what had happened a couple years later down the road, right around 1995, I was handed a book, Eating for Your Blood Type.
Eat right for your type. Yeah.
Eat right for your blood type.
Yeah.
And the gentleman that actually handed me that book, he says, there's something not right with you. I said, well, he goes, do you know your blood type? I said, well, of course I do. I'm a blood type O negative.
A lot of people don't know their
No,
blood type.
but I did.
You did. Yeah.
Because I always knew that when they check your blood and you're at O negative, Rh negative, they want your blood. Okay. It's a very rare blood type. It's much needed through the whole blood center, and I've always donated. So I always knew what my blood type was. So I think that once he heard that, he actually gave me the book.
Yeah, yeah.
And so when I found out that I was eating completely opposite of what the book said,
Yeah.
that I was eating correctly growing up when I was
Right.
younger,
Yes.
and I was healthy,
Uh-huh.
I was stunned. So I actually then reverted right back to it. I started eating meat again. I started eating less grains, less everything, because I was being filled with eating meat.
Yeah.
Within the first month, oh my God, I lost 20 pounds
Yeah.
just like that.
Yeah.
And my running was better, which then made me train for a marathon.
Oh, wow.
And it just got better and better and better. And so, but again, back then, I still didn't understand that this could be a new way of life for me, because I was always in business administration, always working for corporations and you know, climbing the ladder, but I never thought of nutrition or health as a new career path
I see.
until when I finished a marathon, that I felt so good.
Yeah.
And by that time, it was 27 years old.
Wow.
That this could be a new beginning. So that's how it started.
Very interesting, because that is much more a passion than for you to work with a different approach to health, or be a little bit more conscientious about health and
Right.
maybe helping other people
Right.
than when you climb the corporate ladder.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, so you have more, maybe in your case, there are plenty of people who climb the corporate ladder and are very happy with that career path.
Right.
But for you, it was much more a struggle than the natural flow when you got interested in health and said,
Absolutely.
there's so much to learn here.
Right.
Yeah. It doesn't make us doctors, but there
No.
are so many books and information out, and even more today, that makes it, in a way, opens up a lot of discussions, because there are experts who say we are experts and we are against all this, and then there are experts who say we're all for this, and there is somebody in between who debates everything, and that is part of science, right? If they talk about science,
Right.
it is the idea is to prove that it doesn't work, and so to get it better. And over time, this whole notion about cholesterol has been very debatable. And sadly enough, it is a $1 trillion industry for the prescription of medications. And then what we have seen, you and I have seen, is that the effects that those drugs have done, they have been so oriented on lowering a certain number, but the price people have paid for lowering that number has caused other symptoms, has caused other diseases that are even more costly to society as a whole, to the individual, to the quality of life in general. So I do know that this is a topic, when you talk about cholesterol, it probably makes some people go like, whoa, and some people are going to criticize our interview because of what we say or may say. And but that makes it kind of fun too, doesn't it? I mean, this is our experience that we have talking with people for so many years, and in your case, your own personal experience.
Absolutely.
So let's help people out a little bit. What is cholesterol? So the internet says, to be precise, it says cholesterol is a waxy substance found in the blood and all cells of the body. So that is that's a powerful statement. That means it is in our body, not because of an accident, but by default. It just, our body needs cholesterol. And the thing is that where the whole premise of the cholesterol, let's call it the cholesterol hoax, comes in my opinion, is that people will say, physicians will say that cholesterol is primarily determined by the diet that we eat, and that is actually not correct. 80% of all the cholesterol is made by your liver, 20% comes from diet. So it may have an effect, but in the long run, it doesn't have a negative effect. It is something that we need. And cholesterol has, let's talk about some of the benefits that it has for our body. What, you want to say a few things about it?
Well, it definitely produces hormones. It helps your hormones.
That's right. That's a really important one. And
especially for women.
Yeah, but for everybody, men and women make the same hormones, except that the women make more estrogens and progesterone, men make more testosterone and DHEA. But as far as the number of hormones, we all make the same hormones, and that's understood. Yeah, we'll get into that because when we talk about cholesterol, I know that, let's talk about it. The first hormone it makes is called pregnenolone. And pregnenolone is actually a brain hormone. And therefore, they have seen, and we may come back on that in a little bit, that people who take a drug to lower cholesterol lose the production of the progesterone or the pregnenolone hormone. So the pregnenolone goes down, and we see immediately an increase in brain fog and Alzheimer's and dementia. So more and more people who are on a statin drug have incidences of Alzheimer's and dementia. Or you can say, when they have done research on people who are in rest homes because they have Alzheimer's or dementia, they've noticed that an increased number of people actually is taking a statin drug, even at an older age of life. So they've lost the production of pregnenolone.
Absolutely.
Brain. So it is really good for brain. Okay.
I think that's the major one.
Yeah, the brain runs on fat, needs fat in order to work. Anything else?
Our most important, vitamin D.
Oh yeah, vitamin D, very important. The vitamin D, and then it is vitamin D as a hormone, right? But then vitamin D is so all our. In our whole body, we have vitamin D hormone. It's made from cholesterol. And then it is not active yet into vitamin D3. There's a confusion between vitamin D hormone, the active form vitamin D3. And that actually happens when the sun is shining on our body, and we need to expose ourselves to good quality sun for about 25 minutes a day. But that means I have to walk around in a Speedo, and I don't think that's what we're going to do. One of those monokinis, to open up the cheeks a little bit. But that much, we need a lot of sun to penetrate through the skin to convert the hormone vitamin D into actual vitamin D3, which is so important for so many different things.
Absolutely. And then you're going on to say about healing the body of injury, infections.
Yeah, that is really an interesting one. I have noticed that when there is an injury, infection, or inflammation, we make cholesterol, more cholesterol. So what my understanding is, since we talk about the liver, cholesterol is in the liver, a lot of it. But it almost seems that when it needs to go to work, it has no GPS. It doesn't know where to go. It's kind of blind. But it says, I'll do whatever it takes, but I need to get somewhere. And so the liver says, well, we'll provide a taxi for you. And those taxis are called lipoproteins. So lipoproteins will take the cholesterol to the problem area,
There you go.
or whatever they need to do to fix the body. And then you have other taxis that when they're done with their job, it takes it back to the liver. So the lipoproteins that take the cholesterol from the liver to the problem area are called low-density lipoprotein, or LDL.
There we go.
So therefore, if there is a problem, an injury, infection, inflammation, the LDL will go up. And so in LDL, based on what we're going through, the LDL will usually fluctuate. It will go up and down depending on the status of stress on the body, etc. When the cholesterol has done its job, it is the HDL that takes it, the high density lipoprotein, that takes it back from the problem area to the liver to be removed. So you like to have the HDL high.
Yes.
The higher it is, the better it is. That means there is more taxis making sure the cholesterol doesn't stagnate in the bloodstream.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah. So I had a lady who had very high good cholesterol. So my rule of thumb, so when you look at a blood test, there is a reference range. And the reference range today for the HDL, the so-called good cholesterol, so the good cholesterol, okay, it's not the cholesterol that is the vehicle that takes the cholesterol. If it is between 35 and 45, I would say that is dangerously low.
Okay.
When you look these days on a blood test, the reference range for HDL is 30 to 59. So they say you don't want to be over 59, which in my opinion makes absolutely no sense, because the higher it is, the better it is.
The better, right.
So I usually tell people if you're between 35 and 45, it's dangerously low.
Okay.
If you get above 60, you are safe. If you go over 84, 85, you're never going to die. Your cholesterol is so good, it's wonderful. It does everything you need and more. And so this lady had an HDL of 125.
Oh, never mind.
125. She was so good, so healthy, never got sick. And her LDL, so the rule of thumb on LDL is if you are less than 70, that's wonderful. If you are between 70 and 90, I would say pretty good. If you go over 100, then I would say there is probably an infection, injury, or inflammation. Her LDL was always between 69 and 72. So it was just natural for her. And she calls me one day, and this is years ago, and she said, Jacobus, I just went to the doctor, and he wants me to go on a statin drug. And I said, not you. Of all people, you should sell your cholesterol on Wall Street, because people could live a long life. And she said, what happened to your cholesterol? And she said, they just mentioned to me that my LDL went from 72 6 months ago to 299.
Oh, my.
299, just the LDL. And they said, I'm afraid, she said, they told me they were afraid I was going to get a stroke. And I said, now hold on a second. A stroke means there is a blood clot that has to travel through your heart, in and out of the heart, then goes up through the neck to the brain. I said, so where are they seeing all this cholesterol? Do they see it in or around your heart, or do they see it in your neck? You know, it's not a passageway.
Right.
And she said it was on my neck. And I said, what happened to your neck? And then she told me that she fell off her horse a month earlier, and she broke her neck. She said, as a matter of fact, as I'm talking to you, was by phone, she said, I'm wearing a brace to keep my neck straight. And I said, my goodness, that is horrible. So that was an injury.
There you go.
And of course, the neck is broken. So what does the body naturally do? It puts all that LDL to work to take cholesterol to the neck to make sure that the cholesterol can start the healing process.
It's amazing.
And so I recommend that you do other things like vitamin E and garlic and fish oil and vitamin C, and in higher dosages than you would take what says on the bottle. Mm-hmm. She started doing that, and a year later her LDL was down from 299 to 185, and after 2 years it was down to 79, and so she was back to normal. She felt great. Now, the problem with the statin drug is what we'll get into later maybe, is that it has a tendency to remove the cholesterol while it's doing its job.
Right.
So cholesterol really has a very important function as far as healing the body from injuries, infection, or inflammation.
I do notice people, they even mention that they get more sick. They see themselves, their immune systems are not just running. They're more ill, and they're getting more issues, because that's what happened to me. And even though I was so young, it happened. I started noticing it left and right. So I can't imagine as you age, when you get put on a statin, that can happen even more, because of how old you are.
Yeah, I like to compare a statin to to scraping off a scab.
Oh, there you go.
I don't know if it is the perfect example, but it seems to work for me.
Okay.
I tell people, if you cut yourself, so now your skin splices open by accident, hopefully you cut yourself, not on purpose.
Yeah.
But you cut yourself, skin splices open, starts bleeding. So we grab a towel, we put pressure on to make sure we stop the bleeding. After a few minutes, you check and you see the bleeding has stopped, but there's now a little dark line on the wound. And that is actually platelets that have come to the surface, they get exposed to oxygen, and they become hard. So now the platelets form a scab. Now, the scab is there to seal the wound from any infection that could possibly happen, And so underneath there, I say that now the body is sending stem cells to the area to, first of all, remove all the cells that were cut in half. Then secondly, the stem cells come back and they're being told, because stem cells have no specific function yet, to turn into a skin cell and then put in the different layers of skin. And then once that is done, the scab actually comes off. So the scab, you see the little white line there where the scab used to be, and then eventually sunlight will color it right back in. It's miraculous, in my opinion. So if you say, well, I don't like a scab, I want to scratch it off. I don't like the looks of a scab. I don't want anybody to ask me about my scab. So you start scratching it.
Yep. Picking it.
That's right.
You're picking at it.
So that is not helping, because the first thing it does, it hurts. And the second stage is it starts bleeding. And the number 3 is if you keep scratching it, eventually it turns pussy, because the body says, Jacobus, I got this. Don't scratch this.
Yeah, leave it alone.
Leave it alone.
Leave it alone.
I got this.
Leave it alone.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, when you look at cholesterol, if cholesterol is leaving the liver, not if, when cholesterol is leaving the liver, on the taxi called lipoprotein, which is in this case LDL, it gets to where it needs to be and it forms a scab. You can look into an injury and infection, but there are also people who say, well, I don't have that, but I'm getting older and all of a sudden my cholesterol goes up. And I think that since blood vessels and capillaries and arteries are all made of skin-like material, they're all flexible, right? I got blood vessels in my fingers and I can move them because my blood vessels are elastic. But over time, just as our skin gets older and gets wrinkly,
Yeah, we age.
We age. And so then the little wrinkles come and little cuts come in the blood vessel. And so as part of the maintenance, the body will say, well, I got to fix this. So it sends cholesterol to those areas as well. And now you start building all these little scabs that have a function so that stem cells can go in and heal it. And once they've done their job, the stem cells of the scab comes off and is removed back to the liver with the help of the good cholesterol or high-density lipoprotein, which is really a vehicle. That's all it is.
Yeah.
And so when you go to a doctor after you've had an injury or an infection or inflammation, or if you're dealing with some kind of a chronic disease, let's call it that way, and the body is constantly in this healing mode, right? The doctor looks at your blood work and says, well, I see a lot of scabs in your body. Whoa, is that bad, doc? I say, yeah, I don't like scabs. And I want to pick them. I want to scratch them. I want to do that. And well, how do you do that? Well, I have a drug for that. It's a statin drug.
There you go. Yep.
Well, what does that do? Well, it'll scrape that off for you. So because my job is to keep the pipes clean. That's my passion. I want to keep clean pipes. Yeah, but doesn't that hurt? Well, you know, a lot of people who are on a statin drug complain about fatigue and they complain about aches and pains all over the body. They go, oh boy, yeah, they're always aching. Because that indicates all the areas in your body where you actually are working on healing, right? Yeah, but doc, doesn't it start bleeding? Because when I scratch my scab, it starts bleeding. Well, you know, you could have some internal bleeding, but that is a lot less important than keeping the pipes clean. And how about infections? Well, yeah, I haven't really read enough about that. Well, but they have noticed in research that there is an increase in cancer in people who are on statin drugs, and there is an increase in Alzheimer's and dementia, which is another problem that we just mentioned.
Absolutely.
So in a way, let the body do its thing. It's done it for decades, done it for forever in our life, and then for centuries. So anyway, I'm talking. I don't want, if you want to say something, by all means, jump in. But this is just something I've noticed, that aches and pains when people go on a statin drug, more fatigue, and not per se feeling better in the rest of the body.
But their cholesterol is lower.
The cholesterol is lower.
So I don't know. Do we take that as a good thing? But the way our conversation is it's not a good thing. We don't want our cholesterol that low.
No, it is not a good thing, and it is practically. And why do I say this? Because I talk to people, as you do, who share their concerns since they have been on these drugs. When people explain certain ailments that they have, and I ask them if they are or have been on statin drugs recently, most of the time they say yes.
Yes, absolutely.
That couldn't be, because it couldn't be any other way, because it's a very, very busy industry, and doctors prescribe it. And the frustrating thing for me is indeed they're looking at numbers.
Only.
And so you talk about 1994, 1995, when you talked about the book Eat Right for Your Type.
Yes.
When you go back to about 1990, if people had a total cholesterol of roughly 300, so again, we're just looking at one number, which is what most doctors look at. Your cholesterol is over a certain number. They don't look at the individual lipoproteins. No. They'll simply look at your total number and decide this number is too high. Now, before 1990, if you had a total cholesterol of roughly 300 plus, they said, well, just keep an eye on it, but they were not panicking whatsoever. But I remember in 1995 that all of a sudden the number was dropped to about 250, 240, 250. And the issue was also with the FDA then and the CDC, and they said, if your total cholesterol is over 250, you have to go on a statin drug to bring it down.
Absolutely.
And I almost certain that part of the deal was that your insurance rates would go up, because over 250 you had a higher chance of developing heart disease or strokes. That was in 1995. In 1999, 2000, they dropped that number from 250 to 235. In 2006, they dropped it to about 215.
So it's like every 5 years.
Yeah, every 5 years, roughly.
Every 5
years. In 2012, they dropped it to 200. And now we're in 2025, and they're talking about 180, and they want to bring it down.
Yes, I'm even hearing lower than that.
Yeah.
I am really hearing it, and it just astounds me. You know, like all of a sudden our bodies are not miraculous like they used to be.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah.
I mean, their notions, it just doesn't make sense to me.
And the majority of people are blood type O's in this country. And I do believe that there are other blood types if they have, less, like a blood type A or an AB, when they have lower cholesterol, they seem to be okay with it because their natural inclination is to be more a vegetarian or a vegan anyway.
Right.
They do better on, that's what they say. Now, I'm not going to say we have to believe everything there is in the book.
No.
But that book, for me too, has been a great support,
Right.
helper, when people have these issues where they just cannot get over it. It's, whatever they're fighting, it just, they don't have the success.
Yes.
And when I've introduced them to the blood types and say, have you ever looked into eliminating this and focusing more on that? And they say, no, I eat all the wrong things. Then I say, why don't you give it a try
Yeah.
and see what happens?
Right. And usually within, my gosh, days to a month, they already see a difference. But what I'm noticing now also is, we're talking about cholesterol, but we're in the health and wellness field. We have to talk about everything. And I know as we sit with individuals, we talk about everything. It is the stress. It is the bad food choices.
Yeah.
Yes, it's only 20%, but that's a big 20%.
Sure.
Isn't it?
Yeah,
With
why
just
not?
the specific food choices that we have come to. I am glad that we did go from hydrogenated oils, but now we went from hydrogenated to seed oils, which
Yeah.
now they're saying it's still not good.
No.
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 We are making some progress in the health industry, which is good.
Yeah, but what you said indeed, back in the late 70s, early 80s, there was a tremendous incline in increase in natural food stores.
Yes, they were.
And they were going for the no-fat, low-fat
Right.
foods.
Right.
They got rid of everything is 1%, no percent, 2%, skim, whatever. And then in all the packaged food, which I think you agree with, has been a bigger problem than just the straight food.
Right.
The packaged food to fill these stores,
Yes.
right, fill the shelves on the stores. The packaged foods contain a lot of grains, a lot of fats that were shelf stable.
Right.
Like a canola oil,
Well, that's
a
where
safflower
I think that's
oil.
where the hydrogenated oil started coming in.
You bet.
Yeah. It was to prolong the shelf life,
Yes.
and
Sugars.
Well, they had to replace fat. So
Yeah.
they replaced fat with sugar.
Yeah,
Yes.
explain that.
Yeah. So, yes. So imagine taking the flavor out of a food,
Right,
which
the
is
fat.
fat, which we all love and loved, and replacing it with, another sense, which is sweet. So that's still tantalizing, but I think that's more addicting, where fat is very satiating. We really are comfortable
Yeah.
after we eat a nice fatty meal. It's not you're craving more.
No.
I don't crave more fat. I crave enough, and the body just stops.
Yeah.
But now with the prepackaged foods, with the hydrogenated oils, and now all the sugar, I feel like that's the bombardment of overeating, overindulging, because your body can't just stop.
You're never satisfied.
It's never satisfying.
yeah.
And I remember that. How they used to do that even to ice cream back then. The frozen ice cream.
Yeah.
What on earth did they put in it? Because people couldn't stop. They just
Correct.
couldn't stop.
Yeah.
They took the fat out. Nobody
Put
ever
the fat
complained.
on, put the sugar in.
Right. No one ever complained that I can have a bowl of ice cream and it was perfect. And that's changed. That's changed drastically.
And I think there was also the time when cereals and granolas
Oh, I was
and
addicted to
stuff
cereal.
became,
Oh, absolutely.
because they
Oh, yeah.
taste so good, and
Yes.
you have some milk and possibly skim milk.
Oh, yeah, the skim.
So, skim milk, because you stay skinny. But then in your case, you gain 10 to 20 pounds.
I wasn't skinny when I switched to everything.
Yeah.
I used to love butter. I used to love whole milk. I was a milk fanatic, but when I changed, I'm like, well, my whole body changed, So I'm glad I learned a lot back then. I'm really glad, because it changed everything for me, how my thoughts were, and so forth. So it was a good thing. Yeah.
So I was reading about cholesterol, and I know you have too, but we have to talk about a PhD by the name of Ancel Keys. Ancel Keys, actually, he lived a long life. He was 99 or 100. He was born in 1904, and he died in 2004. So there is something to say about that. But Ancel Keys got a PhD. He got involved in oceanography, I think. But he ended up going more into nutrition. And he came up from 1957. He was talking about the fact that there was a connection with food and heart disease. And at that point in the United States, even though people had good diets, let's say less processed foods, heart disease was the number one cause of death in this nation. So in 1957, he started a study that he called the 7 Countries Study. And he took 7 countries, so we're talking 12 years after the First World War, or the Second World War ended. He decided not to work with countries that were severely affected by the Nazis at the time. But he still, Japan was part of it. Japan was part of the study. The United States, Finland, Italy, the Netherlands, and who else was in there? I got to double check that real quick because that was really good. Greece. So Yugoslavia.
Former Yugoslavia.
Yeah, that's where you're from. Yugoslavia, United States, Greece, Japan, Italy, Finland, and the Netherlands. And they were studying people on their eating habits and trying to figure out if there was a link between eating of high-fat foods with potential heart disease. But in a way, there has been a lot of debate going on about his methodology. He didn't involve Germany and France, where even though France, they enjoy their wine, their diets in Germany and France were much more into saturated fats, more meat, more fat, more butter, where in the other nations they had different oils, more the polyunsaturated fats.
Oh, like olive oil.
Like olive oil.
Okay.
And so the criticism afterwards was that he kind of picked and chose the ones that he really liked to do. There is also debate that the 7 countries studies were actually part of a larger group of nations, but he didn't include those in the end because they didn't fill the narrative. And he came to the realization in his studies that when you have a diet that is lower in fat and cholesterol in general, that there would be an immediate link in lowering heart disease.
Okay.
So that was it. So the way it was called the diet heart hypothesis. People should eat less cholesterol and saturated fats to reduce cholesterol and the resulting cardiovascular disease. Now, over time, so first of all, the study was done, took him about 20 years, 1977, and then in 1979, he published the study, presented it to the CDC and FDA, and I think the National Institute of Health. And based on what he promoted, they decided to use that in order to learn how to control heart problems.
Oh, there you go.
That became the standard. That probably changed the food pyramid around. That probably was the start of natural health food stores with all the foods that we just discussed. Over time, there have been nutritionists who have challenged him, but many of them were shut down because that was not the narrative for what they were trying to accomplish. Cholesterol was seen as the main cause of heart disease. Cholesterol was affected in a negative way for them by saturated fats, red meats, butter, lard, tallow, all the stuff that is fat and protein, bacon, pork, ham, all that stuff, eggs. Eggs were vilified.
Eggs. Oh my gosh, eggs.
So all these foods were pretty much vilified.
Yep.
And we have seen to increase the success of what he was trying to say, they started lowering these cholesterol numbers from 300 to eventually 200 and now even less.
Yes.
We are in 2025. What is the number one cause of death in this nation?
Is it still?
Still heart
Yeah,
disease,
it's still heart disease
and strokes.
Yep.
So going back, well, what is it now? 40 plus years. we still have the same number one cause of death in this nation. Number two, we brought it up, is cancer. Number two cause of death in this nation. Number three cause of death in this nation, and this is really interesting. This was a study, there was a study published by Harvard University Medical School in 2016. People can look it up on the PubMed.gov website from the NIH. The number, and in 2018 to 2016 by Harvard, 2018 by Johns Hopkins University Medical School, the number three cause of death in this nation is Western medicine. And that they noticed that over 400,000 people die in this country. It's not me saying it, I'm saying it, but it's not my study. You can look them up. Over 400,000 people die in this nation every year from the side effects of prescriptions and medications, wrong diet, wrong surgery, sepsis in hospitals, whatever. Now, I'm not saying that we therefore have to shut everybody down. But the point is if we're being told in the natural or alternative industry that we don't know what we're talking about, that we don't have the research behind us, that we couldn't make any claims, and we're being told we simply have to follow whatever the CDC says and the NIH says, then I go, no, it doesn't work that way. There is too much new information out that helps people to improve the quality of their life. And I feel we should have the freedom to experiment with those, to try those, and not be vilified for it.
Absolutely.
And if cholesterol has not done anything, cholesterol medication and cholesterol control hasn't done anything specifically for lowering our heart disease rate and stroke rate, then we need to revisit that and say, what are some other options that we can do here?
Right. Not just lowering the cholesterol number.
No.
It just seems that's their go-to.
Yeah.
It seems like every 5 years it's their go-to. How low can we go? I don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me. And it frustrates every single individual. And I do have to say,
because of the symptoms.
I personally have not killed anybody with my helping them to be better. No one's ever gotten sick. No one's ever telling me they got worse. I did tell them there is a little time period of a good 6 months to a year where if you get off your statin, because I want to help you, because I've seen great results of getting off your statin and getting on a very balanced ratio of supplements or foods, you will get right back on it. And I have seen it time and time again, and that's been 15 years now. It's 15 years.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Where do we go from here?
Where do we go from here? Well, there's different options. Of course, I hope that with the changes that we're noticing in the Health and Human Services Department,
currently,
that we're going to open up the floodgates for more opinions.
There you go.
If we have more opinions and studies, that studies are not being vilified, but they're actually respected. And if we can have one-on-one conversations, work with people one-on-one, maybe bring more studies out through podcasts, interviews, maybe other mainstream media outlets, that we start seeing that cholesterol doesn't have to be vilified.
Absolutely.
Then I think slowly but surely we can turn the ship into a much better direction.
We need more honest research. I don't think research.
I think the research is being done. I just don't think it's being published.
It's not being published,
not
but
allowed.
Sometimes the research is profited by certain organizations that create the research to benefit them. And I've seen this time and time again, and so forth. Working with the local university, I actually even did one. I actually did a study a couple years ago. And when I found out that they were going to do a study on a certain oil, they were trying to bring it out into the forefront. It was cottonseed.
Yeah.
The research doctor, or the doctor of research, she mentioned that we are trying to prove that cottonseed is supposed to be a lot healthier than olive oil. She told me that at the end because I asked.
Yeah, yeah.
No other participant asked. I asked because they didn't know my background, and I wasn't going to divulge,
So you asked what? What
I
was the
asked,
question?
well,
to
I
her?
asked her, well, they didn't tell you what kind of oils that they were going to be feeding you for this research study.
Okay.
At the end, because they took your blood work before and then they take your blood work after. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know what oils that they were giving
At the
you.
end of the study.
At the end of the study. I became the study. I wanted to do this. I just wanted to
Yeah.
see. Just, general. So I love it that they actually took your blood work before.
Excellent.
My cholesterol was perfect. And I have to tell you, I haven't had my cholesterol done, my lipids probably for 10, 15 years. Because I've been following the same diet.
Yes.
And the study was only the research study of receiving their types of oils that they were put in specific foods for me to be eating, along with the 5 to 6 other participants. They didn't tell you what kind of oil, but after the study, which was only 2 months, in 2 months,
Yeah.
my LDLs went through the roof.
Really?
They were shocked.
Yeah.
But she's like, why only you? I said, what do you mean, why only me? I was really surprised by that,
Yeah.
So now...
How much did you have to take every day?
A
couple tablespoons?
I had to take up to 3 tablespoons a day of this oil, which I didn't know what it
Did
was.
it have any flavor?
They put it in a smoothie of a mango or a chocolate. So you
Okay.
you definitely felt that it was a heavy fat,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
definitely satiated me, but no sugar involved or anything like that. But I've definitely noticed it was just too much. However, though, the final outcome was I really had to ask. I'm like, well, I would love to see the research results. However, though, may I ask what the type of oil was? Well, she's like, yeah, sure. Since it's the end of the study and not a big deal, it's cottonseed. I was like, I have been fed cottonseed for 2 months now.
Yeah.
And you don't see that my cholesterol is not good now.
Yeah.
And she kind of just diverted it into, we are definitely going to continue researching this.
Were you not allowed to eat any other fat in those 2 months? So could you, when you come home, were you able to just eat meat, fish, butter, any of that?
To be honest, I couldn't eat anything else because those little cups of fat in
Yeah.
chocolate or mango was so filling. I felt like I was going to either lose weight or what, but no. I couldn't eat anything else. It wasn't a very pleasant experience, but I understand for the research purposes.
You bet.
I understand. And so I did it. And I'm very religious. When I start a project, I love to finish it through. But I also wanted to see my blood work, and it was not. I don't think they liked what they saw either. Because they're trying to prove through the organization that is funding them that, yes, this type of oil can be beneficial.
I see.
I'm sorry to say, it was not.
It was
and
not.
I'm being honest, till that that's what happened.
But there's still cottonseed in food.
Well,
They haven't cut it down.
unfortunately, I'm seeing more of it
Yeah.
because they were trying to prove that
Yeah.
it is not a hazardous oil for the body. It was.
It was.
It was to me, So I was very fortunate to do the study because I wanted to. I wanted to participate. I thought it was going to be fun
Yeah,
and exciting
sure.
because I
Yeah.
get to learn, they get to learn.
You bet.
That's all it's about. It's just learning,
Yeah.
and so forth. However, though, it took over 2 years to finally feel normal again after that study.
Wow.
So I never wanted to do another one since then.
Not like that.
Not like that, no. But it's always good to
If
do
it's
that.
about eating ice cream, maybe you would jump in it, right?
Right, yes.
I was going to show a couple quotes here. Ancel Keys.
Yes.
So he has received quite a bit of backlash over the decades. First, all the backlash was pushed down and said,
Oh,
doesn't
yeah.
work.
Right.
But lately, more and more, there is a Jeff Volek. In the late 90s, early 2000s, Jeff Volek does research at Ohio State University, Department of Human Sciences, where you're from. He said, quote, if you honestly look at the evidence about Ancel Keys' research, it continues to get weaker. There are certainly no smoking gun studies out there that really support the diet heart hypothesis. Then Professor Andrew Mente of McMaster University in Canada, he has studied Keys's work closely, Ancel Keys, and he found that Keys is selected to study countries that would support his studies most intensively. So he had an agenda, and he picked the countries that gave him the results he was looking for.
Oh, there you go.
He also identified issues with Ancel Keys's methodology and the fact that it has not been replicated since. So whatever he did, nobody was able to use his technology or his methods and do the same and have the same results. So then you have to wonder, what was Ancel Keys really doing? So one of the things that he did in his study, he would give people a high-fat diet, and he told them he was giving them butter. But he actually had the butter infused with hydrogenated oils. So yes, the fat went up, sometimes the cholesterol went down, but it was not the right way because of the foods that he used. So there is another gentleman who has worked with Ancel Keys. I think he is still alive today. He was younger, obviously, than Keys. But he says, no, I totally defend what Ancel Keys did. And I think that after all these new studies are coming out, eventually we're going to circle back that Ancel Keys was brilliant. He did everything right. And, science is there to prove something and also to see that it is a step into more research, a step into new frontiers, a step into new developments. And I do believe that Ancel Keys did an important work, but not to the point that his point was proven. So after 20 years, to be able to admit that eating fat is actually good for you and lowers your risk of different diseases, it's very important. But if you are at some point get a paycheck from pharmaceutical companies who are trying to sell you a drug that scratches off the scab or that picks on the scab, thereby causing inflammation, tiredness, bleeding, and potentially cancer and memory problems. There you go. Memory problems. I'm not even taking statin drugs, and I forget my sentence. There is, I wrote down some effects of statin drugs. You want to go over there with me, if you don't mind?
Sure.
So statin drugs, let me give you some names. So some of the names are Lipitor or atorvastatin, fluvastatin, which is also called Lescol, lovastatin, which is Altoprev, rosuvastatin, or Crestor. You have simvastatin or Zocor, and then there is pitavastatin or Livalo. And what we have noticed is when people take these drugs, we have noticed a lowered immune system, heart disease, heart failure, because when you take a statin drug, you actually lower your production of coenzyme Q10. And coenzyme Q10 is a very strong fat-soluble antioxidant that is important for overall energy in our heart cells.
And it protects the heart.
It protects the heart.
It takes the heart, yeah.
So if you do a statin drug, you have to take coenzyme Q10 with it.
Right.
But then people say, well, how much do I take? Now, I think that at least you should take 100 milligrams a day. But you can take up to 400 milligrams a day. It's only good for you. There is nothing bad about coenzyme Q10. Yeah. So cognitive impairment is another symptom that comes up in people who are taking a statin drug. And that even turns into Alzheimer's and dementia. And as I mentioned earlier, when you look at people who are in rest homes or in certain care centers who have Alzheimer's, there are a combination of reasons why it is, obviously. But there are many people who are very low in vitamin B12. And there are people who have an issue because they don't have enough cholesterol in the body, because the doctor says they have to stay on this cholesterol-lowering drug for forever, till the end of their life,
just
and it
amazing.
only causes problems.
Absolutely.
You want to go through some of the other ones in the group?
Well, I guess the biggest one that we were also talking about is the cancer.
Yeah.
In a human care trial, the CARE trial, breast cancer rates of those taking a stent went up to astonishing 1,500%.
Percent.
Yeah. And then the heart protection study, or non-melanoma skin cancer, occurred in 243 patients treated with Azucor, compared with only 202 cases in the control group. So there is a link. I think
There
there's
is a link.
There's a huge link.
There is a link. Yes.
The minor but still crazy side effects are dizziness, neuropathy.
Oh,
Yep, myalgia.
that opens up a whole new
Oh.
way. If people, how many people do we talk to who have neuropathy?
Oh, too many.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're trying to figure out where it's from.
Yeah.
They're saying it's not diabetes. Where is it coming from?
Yeah.
There's no link. No one sees the link. Right. Liver, kidney damage, absolutely. And then the depression of the immune system,
Yeah.
once again. So
Yeah, it is. It's a big thing. And there was another thing, a note that I took. So when you do a blood test, so for most people, when you take a blood, when you go to the doctor and they do a lipid test, the lipid is the cholesterol. They always give you a total cholesterol. They give you what your HDL is. They tell you what is the normal range, what is the reference range. They give you an LDL, and they also provide you with triglycerides.
yes.
And so is that enough? I don't think so. There are studies done, and I recommend anybody just look this up. We should check the body, the blood, also for the particle size of cholesterol molecules. So how large or small are your little cholesterol molecules? If they're large, you would think, whoa, that plugs up everything.
Right, and that's
It's complete opposite.
Yeah, complete opposite. Yes.
So the larger your molecules, your LDL molecules or particles, and the HDL particles, the healthier you are.
right.
So I usually say that large particles, they bounce around like beach balls.
Well, they call them fluffy, so they're lily fluffy.
The fluffy.
The larger ones.
Oh, nice.
Absolutely. Yes.
I
So
like
they
fluffy.
will bounce around.
See, I like fluffy.
See, there you go. It works.
Yeah. And the little ones, they have a tendency to fit into any unevenness in the blood vessel and arteries. So they plug, they
They'll start
stick
plug-
to each other.
Yes, and they'll plug.
They plug
Right.
and they go higher. So when you look at that, if somebody comes to me and says my LDL is 150,
Yes.
but they have large particles, then I am less concerned about them than if they would have an LDL of 95 with small particles.
There you go.
Much more dangerous. So that is an important part, and the same with the HDL. And there is a test that you can do, and I think that if people are really concerned, before you give somebody a medication,
Yeah.
just do the extra test. Don't just look at the number. And this is where I see the problem comes in with allopathic or Western medicine. They look at one number, and all of a sudden, boom, there it is. There is a prescription drug for it. But if they are really concerned about your health, your heart health, do a little bit more research before you decide you're going to give them a medication for something that has too many other variables that are important to look at. When I see people with high LDL, I always ask them, have you been suffering from an injury,
Oh, that's
an infection, or
point.
inflammation? And the amount of people who say that they fell down, like you, when you fell down with your bike
Right, yes.
and you had a bad scrape,
Yes.
what do you think your body is doing?
There
It
you
sends
go.
all that LDL cholesterol to start healing the
Right.
tissue.
And that's why my cholesterol was
The
high.
LDL was high.
But they didn't mention that. They
Nope.
said that I have bad cholesterol that was too
Yeah.
high for me.
Yeah.
Right.
Since Ancel Keys came out with his study, and since we started seeing all these health food stores and all the no-fat, skim, low-fat, 2%, whatever fat, and products that had seed oils in it to give it a certain preservation on the shelf, we have seen that in those foods, the nuts and the seeds, the grains and the beans, we have seen an increase in omega-6s. These are all omega-6s. Any fat from nuts, seeds, grains, and beans is an omega-6. There needs to be a ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 of about a 2-to-1 ratio, 6 to 3. But in the American diet, the way the nuts and seeds and grains and beans are promoted, we see there is a 20-to-1 ratio. The body is not able to break down omega-6 in the digestive tract into the particles that are essential, which is GLA, gamma linolenic acid. We cannot convert all that omega-6 quick enough before the next meal comes in. So the body is stuck with unprocessed omega-6. It stores it to deal with the next batch of food. The adding up of all those fats causes us at some point that the body says, I need to store this away. And it stores it away, but eventually the storage is full. And now they say, we're just going to convert it into arachidonic acid, or AA, arachidonic acid. And arachidonic acid is always inflammatory. Arachidonic acid is inflammatory. So omega-6, too much, the body cannot break it down into what it needs, which is the GLA. The GLA is important for hormones, important for the immune system, and important for hair, skin, and nails. So it's a great fat. It's what we call an essential fat. We need it, but we don't make it ourselves, so we need to get it from food.
Right.
Then you have the omega-3, very high in fish. It's only omega-3, but also in flax seeds and chia seeds, the only seeds that are actually higher in omega-3 than omega-6. And omega-3 is always anti-inflammatory. So by having more omega-6s convert into arachidonic acid, over time, we have seen an increase, especially since the 1980s. We've seen a tremendous spike in diseases that end with the word itis. So arthritis, bursitis, sinusitis, hepatitis, diverticulitis, colitis, you name it. If it is an itis, it is an inflammatory. So when people go to a doctor and say, I have blah, 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 the doctor will say, I hate for you to walk around with a symptom that you don't like, so I give you an anti-inflammatory. And that's why we have become a nation addicted to anything that is an anti-inflammatory, including the opioids. But so that is one thing. So we go back now to the Ancel Keys thing.
There you go.
By promoting a diet high in omega-6s, we have seen an increase in aches and pains in people, which therefore increases LDL. Right? LDL goes after infection, inflammation, and injury. So now the doctor says, so first we promote the food that brings up the inflammation.
Yeah.
We're going to give you anti-inflammatories for that.
Sure.
The LDL goes up because we have inflammation.
Yeah. And now we have to give
And
you
now
the
we get statin drugs to do that.
There you go.
And that is why the average that's why the average American is over 65 takes about 8 different medications every day.
That's
average.
Absolutely.
It's crazy.
And I think you mentioned one time, and I'll never forget this. You literally said, I've never been deficient in a medication.
That's right.
How like that, when you said that, those little words, you have to think about that.
Yeah.
Am I really deficient in a medication? What if the doctor said that? Like, are you really deficient?
Exactly.
Because, well, what is a supplement? A supplement is something you are deficient in. That's why you have to take it into the body.
Diet first.
Right,
And then supplements to accelerate.
Right.
Yes.
But that's where you see deficiencies.
Yeah.
Do they see a deficiency? How are they fixing it? You know, so when you said that, that was profound. I really, that brought it all together.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, do you have the disease or the infection or inflammation because you were not taking the medication yet? Had you taken the medication from the day you were born,
Right.
you probably wouldn't have been sick today.
I don't know
Makes
about
no
that.
sense.
No, it doesn't make
Makes
sense.
no sense.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that one of the other things that we need to check for is homocysteine levels.
There you go.
So homocysteine is an amino acid that is involved in the breakdown of another amino acid called methionine. You need enzymes for that. And those enzymes are actually B vitamins. It's B6, B12, the B vitamin folic acid. And then there is also studies done that said if you add to that trimethylglycine, or TMG for short, that your homocysteine will come down. When I did my radio show, I had a bunch of shows with a registered nurse. I think she had a master's in nursing. Her name was Ellie Cullen. Ellie Cullen had been a phlebotomist for over 45 years. So what she did, she looked at blood. And she started working at Johns Hopkins University in medical school. And she did a lot of phlebotomy. And there was something in her, sometimes you wonder how people get inspired, that there is something coming in that makes them do things that you go like, eureka, right? How did they come up with this? Great, brilliant. So she said, most people who get blood work done in a medical center already have a disease. They're already not feeling well. That's why they go to the doctor.
That's why they come in, right?
Right.
Okay.
So she said, that in a way gives us reference ranges on a blood test that are based on sick people.
Oh my.
If you can call it that way, or people who don't feel good, right? She said, I want to test my friends who say they're healthy, and I want to check their blood. And then she started archiving all that into categories, male, female, whatever ethnic, race, culture you were, decades. So she has taken blood from 1-day-old babies and people who were over 100. And then she put them all in these decades categories based on information that was important. And then she started putting all the numbers in there, coming up with suggested reference ranges in order to stay healthy. And so she said that when it comes to cholesterol, the homocysteine levels are 40 times more accurate in predicting a cardiovascular event than cholesterol ever will. And that was not, she wrote it, but she said researchers have shown that elevated homocysteine is 40 times more accurate in predicting cardiovascular problems than cholesterol ever will. And so I tell people, why are you not being tested for homocysteine levels also as part of the lipids?
And guess when they check it? When you're in the hospital having a heart attack. That's when they'll check your homocysteine levels.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Do you know why I know this?
No.
My own husband.
Ah.
He ran into the hospital with chest pains. He had a cardiac arrest on the table. That's when they checked his homocysteine levels, which were through the roof. They didn't even bother checking his cholesterol. They didn't check his cholesterol. It was his homocysteine levels. It just dawned on me.
Wow.
So he had a cardiac arrest twice. They took him in for a stent. He had a blocked artery.
Yeah.
So there you go. They don't check it until it's happening.
Wow.
So they know that there's that link between homocysteine levels and cardiac arrest. So, yeah, it should be checked way before that.
It should be checked annually.
How about the annually when you get your
Yeah,
lipids?
if you do that, but there's no money because how do you solve the homocysteine issue?
Right.
B6, B12, folic acid,
Supplements.
TMG.
Right.
Dietary supplements.
There you go.
And I think of all those, the B6 seems to be the most important. But I recommend people. So what are the numbers for homocysteine? Well, Ellie Cullen says ideal would be less than 5. Well, I have never seen anybody less than 5. But I would say 5 to 10 is very, very good.
Okay.
Would be ideal. Perfect. 10 to 15 is you got to watch out. You really got to bring it down, but it's not over the top. Once you go over 15 on your homocysteine levels, you're really in a very dangerous category.
He was 21.
When that happened? Oh, his number was 21.
Well, he was going into cardiac arrest.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's only the time you check it? Never. I
Makes no
asked him,
sense.
and then I asked him, "Did you ever get your homocysteine levels checked before?" He goes, "I didn't even know what that was."
Yeah.
He didn't even know what that
No,
was. You
no.
never hear that.
If you're not educated
Right.
about it, then you won't ask.
No, you won't ask,
Yeah.
and they won't tell you. Why won't they tell you?
Yeah.
These are all the adequate tests that we can provide for you if these are the concerns.
Yeah.
And then,
And then C-reactive protein is another one.
oh, there you go.
CRP or C-reactive protein, that's an inflammatory marker in the body, primarily the vessels.
And they are checking that more now. I do notice.
They are?
Yes, they are.
Voluntarily, or you have to ask for it?
I do believe voluntarily.
Huh.
I have seen it on individuals' blood work, like my mom's, of course, Kent's. Yeah, that's becoming more profound now, which is a good thing. So
Well, I wouldn't, what do we say? We wouldn't be amiss if we don't mention some of the options that people have to if cholesterol is still your concern, if it is still your concern, but there are books have been written about it, about how cholesterol is not the cause of the problem, but what can you do? Well, you can, they actually say people who eat a lot of meat and fat and lard and bacon and eggs,
now,
they're actually a lot healthier. So the bottom line is that the research shows that low cholesterol people die sooner than people with high cholesterol. High cholesterol is very protective, and people with high cholesterol live longer and healthier than people with low cholesterol, especially if it was stimulated, fabricated, if it was forced in the body to have low cholesterol. The body is constantly fighting against it. Now, if cholesterol is still a concern, there are nutritional supplements that you can take to balance cholesterol, to balance the levels. And let's go through some of those.
sure. You, at top of the list, garlic.
Garlic
Top of the list.
is, you can take it in a dietary supplement, you can take it, eat it.
Eat it.
It's just good. It keeps the pipes clean.
I think
So-
they call it a blood cleanser. I think they literally, I've heard the notion call that garlic is a blood cleanser. It cleans up the blood very nicely.
Yeah.
And it helps the blood pressure because it's doing that.
Yeah.
So I do believe that's the number one.
Yeah, that is one, and then fish oil, obviously, but then
omega-3s.
primarily the high EPA fish oil. The EPA fat in fish oil is good for heart, good for cholesterol, good for inflammation or joint pain, and for depression, actually. So, and that often happens also with people with very low cholesterol. They have a tendency to be more moody and depressed than people with high cholesterol.
Well, doesn't that tie in with the low vitamin D levels?
Yeah, also.
See, I think that's
Yeah.
all a tie. They all tied
Absolutely.
into each other.
Yeah, so the the high EPA, but then what we're looking at is you have to look at your label. Do you take a teaspoon? Do you take a capsule? Whatever you're doing, but add up how much you need to take to get roughly 2,000 milligrams of EPA. So is that 9 capsules? Is it a tablespoon? Is it a teaspoon? Just get close to 2,000 milligrams of just the EPA in a blood in your supplement, and do that for 3 months, and then retest and see if that works.
Sometimes it can take a little longer.
Yeah.
But I don't mind because you're talking about longevity. So
That's
if it
right.
does take 3 months to a year,
Yeah.
do it. Take the 3 months to a year because you are talking about longevity. You
Yeah.
know, it's not this short spurt of time.
No.
Yeah.
That's totally true. Then years ago, maybe 10 years ago, there was a study published in the Wall Street Journal about citrus bergamot. And what the article said, that bergamot increased your good cholesterol within 1 month. So they gave people 500 milligrams, that is just one capsule, 500 milligrams a day. 2 capsules was not necessary. It didn't improve much better. But 500 milligram once a day for 30 days increased people's good cholesterol by 25% and lowered the triglycerides and the LDL by about 26%. So if you feel that is something you want to try try bergamot and do it for a month and see what happens.
That's been very successful to some individuals for
Yeah,
sure.
not everybody. Some people haven't
I know.
noticed anything.
Yes, right.
But so you don't mess with cholesterol that doesn't have to be messed with. Niacin, B3. I would say niacin or B3 because if you take the straight niacin, that's what you need to do. You don't want to take niacinamide or flush-free niacin. You need to take the real deal. It gives you a flush, but it also it helps with the increase in HDL. Is that what you referred to?
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it does touch on the LDLs as well, but it's the main one when individuals ask, gosh, I just really want to raise my HDLs. Niacin is the most simple one.
Yeah.
It really is.
Flaxseed oil, high in omega-3, very good anti-inflammatory, very important for the membranes of the cells, just like cholesterol is. So they contain more a plant cholesterol, and the plant cholesterol is really good can help with your own cholesterol to make it healthier. Fibers,
Okay.
Reggie's rice. So people often come in for Reggie's rice.
Not my favorite.
No, because Reggie's rice is really Mother Nature's form of a statin drug. So the problem with Reggie's rice is that it also strips the blood from coenzyme
There you
Q10.
go. Right.
So you need to take coenzyme Q10 with it. Yeah. The other, that is pretty much it. Well, fibers, plant sterols, plant cholesterol, those are some good ones. So the list I have real briefly is garlic, flax oil, high EPA fish oil, Reggie's rice with coenzyme Q10, between 100 and 400 milligrams would be fantastic, citrus bergamot, niacin B3, fibers and phytosterols or that have plant cholesterol. One more thing I want to say is, and then we wrap it up, is that people say, well, how about plaque? What is plaque? Cholesterol is plaque. And I said, no. Plaque is a complete different animal altogether. But the interesting thing is plaque contains cholesterol because cholesterol knows I got to go into the plaque to help solve the problem that we have. So cholesterol mixes in with the plaque and you'll find cholesterol in the plaque. But the doctors say plaque is cholesterol. No,
Right. No, it's
a
not.
part of the cholesterol.
Right.
Part of the plaque, I should say.
Because we did discuss that cholesterol is a waxy substance.
Yeah.
So wax, what does wax do? It sticks.
Yes.
So isn't it usually calcium deposits? Could that also be?
Oh, absolutely. I
then-
think atherosclerosis and calcification, but
Yes.
that has to do part of how we digest food. That's why I often tell people don't drink liquids around your meals.
There you go.
Because you need stomach acid. You need stomach acid to break any calcium that you take into a cell absorbable calcium. If you drink liquids before you eat, liquids while you eat, and liquids right after you eat, you are diluting the acid. It cannot make that calcium break down to the point where the cells can absorb it. So if you have red blood cells that carry calcium in their backpack and they show up at the cell door and the cell goes, I'm not going to take this, the body is going to dump it. The blood cells are going to dump it in the blood vessels.
There you are.
It's too heavy to carry back to the
Right.
liver. So now you have calcium deposits.
That's what I hear all the time.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then, sadly enough, most people will assume, because the doctor says, I got to get rid of this atherosclerosis plaque, it's usually just calcium deposits. And so we got to make sure that when we eat, we don't drink while we eat. We drink in between meals, but not around our meal. 2 hours around our meals, we shouldn't be drinking, or maybe just sipping a little bit, but not much. And then we help our acid. And as we get older, we make less acid, so therefore heart disease and plaque and atherosclerosis, you barely find in young people. You find it primarily in the older generation who has less stomach acid, who enjoys food more, drinks while they eat, etc., and they have the problem.
There you go.
It's a big topic.
It's amazing how things connect. One thing connects to another.
Yeah.
And since we are going to be wrapping it up here, Going on to another topic that we're hoping to get into another show here is the cholesterol, or our good fats in our body, and how it links to our hormones.
Absolutely. Hormones is a big issue.
I can't wait.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
I think that's going to be a nice one, because it's going to be a nice direct link into it of how our hormones are affecting our lives.
Yeah. Good. Awesome. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you.
This has been delight.
Yeah, it goes fast, doesn't it?
It does go fast.
Yeah. Well, thank you all. Thank you all for watching and listening, and hopefully you took some notes. I hope that the information makes sense to you, that you do more research for yourself, that maybe when you are going for a physical every year, that you ask for some more tests just to get more clear about your cholesterol, your health, maybe why some of the symptoms that you're experiencing could very well be related to medications that you're taking, or maybe because of a certain deficiency that you have in your body, in your blood, in your brain, in your cells, etc., etc. So the body is complex, it's beautiful, it's amazing, it's miraculous.
Oh, miraculous.
But that is what we're trying to talk about on this show. So tune in for another episode of Health in Focus with Jacobus, and thanks for listening today. All the best to you. All right. Thank you, Mitzi.
Thank you.
Visit healthinfocusnow.com.